Hi, I'm Nate.
I'm Charlie.
And I'm Talha, and today we'll be talking about Federalist paper number 10 by James Madison. Did you know that the Constitution that we all know and love today was once disliked by many Americans around the time of its creation? A certain group of people, known as the Anti-Federalists, thought that the government should be much smaller than it is today.
James Madison, John Jay, and Alexander Hamilton wrote 85 essays titled The Federalist Papers to convince the people that the Constitution was going to help everyone, including the Anti-Federalists in many ways. We are going to take a look at the Federalist Paper number 10 by James Madison. In the paper, he mentions these things called factions. Now, before we jump into the paper, we need to understand what a faction is.
Well, basically a faction is a bunch of people who share common interests, sort of like how one group might like hot dogs and another group might like hamburgers. Madison says that factions create problems between the majorities and the minorities because the minorities don't have their opinions expressed. The main difference between the majority faction and the minority faction is the property that each faction owns. So, Madison logically decides that factions should somehow be dealt with. Two ways he thought he could fix the problems caused by factions were to either fix the root of the problem or to control the effects.
Madison gave two options to get rid of factions completely. The first was to take away the freedoms from factions. These freedoms include basic rights like the freedom of speech and assembly. As Madison described it, liberty and factions can be compared to air and fire. Factions need liberty to survive, just like fire needs air to survive. If we take away liberty from factions, we take away the air from the fire. Without liberty or air, both democracy and fire would die. The second option was to make sure everyone had the same opinion about everything. This would be impossible because you can't make people think the same way. It's against human nature. With these two options being completely impossible, Madison says that factions are natural and cannot be destroyed. So, Madison decides that the effects of factions must be controlled. How does he plan to do this?
With a republic, of course. Through representatives, the incorrect opinion of the majority can be filtered out. The reason he decided to use a republic and its representatives rather than everyone having one vote is that the corrupt desires of the majority can be avoided. In direct democracies, on the other hand, the corrupt desires of the majority are unavoidable since people make the decisions without representatives getting in the way. Athens is an example of a direct democracy. Not just any size of Republican democracy will work either, according to Madison.
He thinks that a large number of representatives would be better because there would be more qualified people to serve for the good of America. This would also help in reducing corrupt representatives since there are so many people to serve as representatives. With the addition of more people, more splits within the majority faction were created since there was a greater variety of interests in the majority group. Now that Madison had stated that a large Republican democracy is the only way to run America, he continued to explain the concept of separation of powers.
You see, before the Constitution became official, America had pretty much one branch of government, the legislative branch. This branch made the laws, but who determines if these laws are fair? What happens when people break those laws? Well, James Madison came up with a solution that included adding more branches into the government to introduce a system of checks and balances. He wanted to add a judicial branch. This branch makes sure that the laws passed by the legislative branch would be just. The reason that it's not a good idea for the legislative branch to judge the law is because they would make the laws favor them and their interests. With the power divided between the two branches of government, faction power would be reduced and corruption would be limited.
In summary, Madison shows that factions, which are a bunch of people who have the same ideas or beliefs, are a part of America and that the government should control them to prevent instability. The only way to control the factions is through a republic or a representative democracy. This democracy, he claims, should have a system of checks and balances to make sure no one faction becomes too powerful. All in all, Madison wanted to guarantee the Anti-Federalists that the minority's interests would be saved with a ratification of the Constitution that we hold dear to our hearts today.